Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back. You might notice some things about me today. I am wearing red, white, and blue, and I I have a sticker. Can you see what my sticker says? It says I voted. That's right. It's the time of year when we get to vote, and this year is especially important because we get to vote for the president of the United States. That's a really big deal. We get to do that every 4 years in America because we live in a democracy. That's right. That's a big word. Can you say that? Democracy? Yeah. And that means that we get to be a part of choosing our leaders. So, like in some places, they have like kings and queens. That's called a monarchy. And in those places, the people don't get to pick who the leaders are, right? There's a queen, and when the queen dies, then her son becomes king. And then when he dies, his son becomes king. And it's like that, right? And so nobody gets to choose. But I live in America. Maybe you live in America too. And if you do, then that means when you grow up, you get to pick your leaders. We get to pick our senators and our congressmen and our sheriff and our mayor and our governor. And every 4 years, we get to pick a president. And so that's what's going on right now. And so I did early voting, but on Tuesday, November 5th, we will be electing a new president, and that's very exciting. And so hopefully your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, aunt, uncle, somebody in your family has talked to you a little bit about voting, and maybe you even get to go with them to vote. I used to get to go with my dad to vote when I was little, and that was always really exciting. So today I have a wonderful book for us, and it's all about kind of the process of how people vote. It's fiction, which means it's fake. Remember, fake means fiction. It's not a real story. It's a made up story, but it's a good example of what happens when people get to vote. Are you ready to find out what the book is? Okay, let's look at it together. So it's called Grace for President. Look there, that's Grace. And Grace decides that she wants to run for president. Now, she's a little girl, and so she can't run for president in real life because you have to be a grown up to be president. But she decides to run for president in her class, in her school, and all of the other boys and girls in her class and in the class next to her, they get to vote for who the next president is going to be. And so we get to see a little bit of the process of the things that the candidate, that's the person running, the things that the candidate has to do. So the candidates tell you things that are important to them, and they tell you some things that they want to do if you put them in charge. And so that's what happens in real life too. The candidates that we are looking at to choose our next president or governor or mayor or whoever's running for whatever office, they tell us things that are important to them. And so then we can think, hey, do they think the same things are important that I think? Or if they don't, then maybe I'm going to vote for the other person. And so that's how we decide who we're going to vote for, right? We don't just pick the person that we like the best. We pick the person who has the most things that they believe in that are the same as what we believe in. It's kind of a complicated process, but that's a little bit of information about it. So in our story, Grace decides that she wants to run for president because in the story, there's never been a woman president. And when I'm recording this, there's never been a woman president, but there is a woman running for president. So we'll have to see after Tuesday if she wins or if she doesn't. And maybe you're watching this after Tuesday and it's already happened. But when I'm recording this, it hasn't happened yet. So Grace decides that she would like to become the first woman president. And so her class and the class next to hers, they go through this whole process, and we get to learn all about the voting process, including a thing called electoral votes. And that's kind of complicated. And so it talks about it a little bit in the story. And then I talk about it a little bit at the end of the book. So make sure that you stay around for the end when I give a little bit of an explanation about that. Now, this book was written for us by Kelly DiPucchio. And so, yay, Kelly, thanks for writing this fun story to help teach us all about this. And the pictures are by Liyun Pham. And so they really are great pictures or illustrations in this story. I love this book because it is fun, it is about children, and it teaches us about something that's very important in our country and that we are very fortunate to have in our country because in a lot of countries around the world, they don't get to vote. So when you grow up, make sure that you vote because your voice matters and what you want to have happen in your country matters. And so Grace takes this very seriously and she runs for president. It's such a great story. I hope that you like it as much as I do. Let's read it together now, okay? Come on, join me. Grace for president. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all of the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell could not believe her eyes. Where are the girls? That is a very good question, said Mrs. Barrington. The truth is, our country has never had a woman president. No girl president? Ever? Grace asked. No, I'm afraid not, said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and stewed. No girls? Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? Finally, she raised her hand. Yes, Grace. I've been thinking it over, and I'd like to be president. Several students in the class laughed. Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace, said Mrs. Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary. The snickering in the room stopped. Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Mrs. Barrington asked the class. Nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be easy, Grace thought. The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. In the name of democracy, I have invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election. Their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school's spelling bee champion. His experiments always took a blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was captain of the soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be so easy after all, Grace thought. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except for Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 16 mean? Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. That number is determined by how many people live in that state, said Mrs. Barrington. Each of you will be a representative for your state. Altogether, our country has 538 electoral votes, Mr. Waller explained. On election day, the candidate who receives 270 electoral votes or more wins the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half of all the electoral votes, Mr. Waller said. Becoming president really wasn't going to be so easy, Grace thought. Grace came up with a campaign slogan. Make history. Vote Grace Campbell for president. Thomas came up with his own campaign slogan. Vote for Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job. Grace listened to what issues were important to the students, and she made a list of campaign promises. A peaceful school, no bullies, a cleaner school, no littering, better hot lunches, no more fish, stick tacos. Thomas made up his own list of promises. Free tutoring, free soccer lessons, Fish stick tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons. Thomas made posters and buttons too. Each week, the teachers set aside time for the candidates to meet with their constituents. Polls were taken. Voters were making their choices. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out free cupcakes. After school, she held rallies. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't worried. He had cleverly calculated that the boys held slightly more electoral votes than the girls. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiment. After school, he played soccer. Even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad, she organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly. Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellowhammer State of Alabama casts its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb, Fletcher said. The last frontier state of Alaska casts its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb. Hannah called out, the Grand Canyon state of Arizona casts its 11 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. And so it went. State after state after state cast their electoral votes. The scoreboard in the gymnasium kept track of the totals. The voting demonstration was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. The Badger State of Wisconsin casts its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell. Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes. She had 267. There was only one state still unaccounted for. Wyoming. Thomas grinned. Grace felt sick. Sam walked up to the microphone. He looked at Thomas. He looked at Grace. He looked down at Grace's handmade flag. Sam didn't say a word. What are you waiting for? Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. The equality state of Wyoming casts its 3 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers and a few boos. Mrs. Barrington approached the podium. With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. Why did you do it? She asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. Because, he said, I thought you were the best person for the job. The following week, students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentations. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room and glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be President of the United States. This time, everyone believed that she would. The end. Wasn't that a great book? And boys and girls, that is a lot of information about the way a real election works. All of the people in the states cast their vote, and whichever candidate has the most votes in a specific state, that state's electoral votes go to that person. It's a little bit complicated, but at the end of the day, we get to exercise our very special right to vote, and we get to elect the leaders of our country because we live in America in a democracy, and that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Thanks for watching. If you love this book and want a copy of your very own, you can get one at the link below. If you had fun reading along with me, please like this video. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and check out all the other videos where I read books aloud just for you. I hope I'll see you guys soon and you'll come back and read with me again next time. Bye!